Welcome to Circle Podcast, brought to you by Circle Sanctuary, one of the oldest nature spirituality churches in the United States, connecting people of nature-centered paths around the world. Join us throughout the week for a variety of shows discussing various topics, celebrating the divine in all of its forms through nature worship, rituals, education, and building bridges of community. Welcome to Urban Unwitches, a podcast to educate, inform, and expand the pagan community. Please join our Discord channel, Urban Unwitches Podcast. Follow us on TikTok at Urban Unwitches, and listen to all our past podcasts on your favorite podcasting platform. You can also join us on YouTube at Urban Unwitches. Now, back to the show. So, Kyler,
Yes,
I have a confession that you're going to laugh about.
Oh, okay. That's better than what I thought. Okay.
I'm stuck on K-pop Demon Hunters. You can thank Kathy, my sister, for that. It's on a continuous loop now.
We had a whole discussion, Dia. There was this is why we have meetings. Oh my.
Well, and let me tell you what's even worse about this situation. My computer in my car has broken, so I don't have a backup camera anymore, and I don't have a sound system anymore. And so I put a little Bluetooth speaker, because you know Tony has a ton of those laying around, and I put it on my rearview mirror, and so I'm choosing to listen to K-pop Demon Hunters. It's not like it's just coming up. No, I'm actually hitting the button and listening to K-pop Demon Hunters.
So the entire conversation we had this morning in recording was about like not having inherent judgment in the craft. And I'm now finding my morals being challenged. So I may have to address the hypocrisy in my soul.
You may have to. The other thing I realized this morning after we got off was I'm going to be at the Pagan World Congress. And that's like in 2 weeks. And then I was like, oh, I wonder what I'm presenting on.
Oops.
So I spent the day like really quick going through my PowerPoints trying to figure out if I could put something together, and so that I would have time to think on it so that I could make changes if I wanted to. So that was the other thing that I realized about today, that Pagan World Congress is coming and I'm not prepared, but I am now much more prepared than I was this morning.
I have no judgment for that. So
yeah, as we promised this morning, which is for you in November, but we did promise a 2-part series. When we talked about this morning was a lot about the world the way it is right now, and how that's affecting paganism, and how that's having a bad impact on us, and what we can do about it. And we promised that we would bring you a solution. And really what we've done is bring you Michael M. Hughes, who has written Magic for the Resistance, Rituals and Spells for Change. And so we're hoping he can help us, help you find a way to fight back a little bit and the pagan. Michael, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here with you guys tonight.
Excellent. So, we normally check in and see how we're doing. We actually have been on hiatus, and so we had a lot of catching up to do when we did our first part of this series. So we'll ask you, how is your day going? How's your life going? What's on with you?
It's going okay. I've got a lot that I'm working on. A day job as a journalist, and night job with courses that I teach, and stuff I'm writing, and a role-playing game that I'm rolling out. So it's been very busy, but I think it's good to be busy because it keeps me from dwelling on the world falling apart, which as we all know is just like the stupidest timeline ever. Like, did it have to be this dumb?
yeah, the end of the world was supposed to be like higher brow or something. This is kind of like just cheap.
Yeah, it's tawdry, it's banal, it's just dumb, just the dumbest timeline. I keep trying to imagine how things could have gone differently, and but here we are, and we have to work with what we have.
Well,
I like how you put that. Yeah.
yeah, we do. We have to work with what we have. One of the things that I've learned about you is that you've also are a fiction writer and you've written Blackwater Lights trilogy, which I read the synopsises of, which is very interesting. Kyler has already purchased them, I believe.
Oh, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that seems like a lifetime ago, but yeah, it's I kind of took all my weird esoteric supernatural conspiratorial interest and research, and it just came out in this, horror story, which I love. I've always gravitated towards scary movies and scary books. I grew up on Stephen King and all that. So yeah, it was nice to be able to take all that stuff in my head and let it come out in a story, which was a lot of fun to write. I'm hoping to get back to more fiction at some point, but other things have taken
Mhm.
precedence these days.
yeah, you were
Was
doing a tarot class, right, through your website. Is that right?
Yeah, I do. I teach an online tarot class, and also, so that's like a foundations course, and that's pretty much for newbies or people who are kind of sort of have a grounding but don't know how to take it a little further. And I have a tarot magic class too, which is
Mm,
my latest course, and that's geared towards magic practitioners of, whatever style or whatever flavor of magic they like to do, but it's really based around the tarot and the archetypes of the tarot. And the magic is really it's the kind of magic that can be plugged in to any magical system, or it could just be done in its own way. But it's not it's not, witchcraft. It's not
mhm.
pagan. It's just magic that arises from my study of the tarot. But it could be plugged in, witches. It's easy for witches to kind of plug in to
true.
their system.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I liked about the book is it's very clear that it's not necessarily just pagan. And we have a lot of crossover here. We have a lot of newbies, and then we have
Mhm.
people who are curious. And so we get a lot of that here. And that's one of the things I liked about the book. You don't have to be pagan or even have ever done witchcraft to not pick up this book and then use this book. So it's one of the things I really, really appreciated about it. We keep talking about doing the laws of magic or the axioms of magic, and we still haven't done it. But
Hmm.
it's out there as in the many, many lists of things that we want to get to eventually.
Hmm.
Kyler.
Right. It's been on the calendar literally 6 times. And then it keeps getting pushed for something a little more, I don't know, exciting. I actually really wanted to thank you because so I myself in my practice have worn a lot of different hats, and it is very clear you've studied like in every direction, which is kind of how my brain works as well. But my husband is actually Afro-Caribbean. He's both Jamaican and Haitian. And in the historical part, the examples that you gave of magic for resistance. I was reading this next to him in bed, which incidentally, first physical book I've picked up in like 3 years.
Oh
And
well.
I smelled book and I was so happy because I had been missing that for a hot minute and I didn't know that I'd missed it. But as I'm reading, I like look over at Chris and I'm like, look at this. And he's like reading through and it is it is so refreshing having family now from that region where it's not just an afterthought, like you're actually showing the history and the role that this played in the history of that country. It was really appreciated. It kind of surprised him. You got the raised eyebrow, which for him is high praise. So
That's great. Yeah. Well, I'm really happy to hear that because magical resistance is so, cross-cultural, and
mhm,
so much of the stories that really like fired me up, and stories I wasn't really familiar with, are like from the Afro-Caribbean traditions, or Latin American, African, particularly conjure and hoodoo, the magic
mhm,
that came out of enslaved African people in this country. I
mhm,
think is so relevant now. And for me, my thinking of magic, like when I got into magic, it was all like Golden Dawn, ceremonial. I was,
mhm,
I was
Mhm.
like I was at the craft store, Michael's craft store, like, multiple times a week, like, so I can make my ritual tools and, so it was all these like this stuff that you had to have. And then, later on in my own studies, I started reading and realizing that like this powerful magic was done with burlap, with
Hmm.
plants that these people who were, ripped from their country and put somewhere, where they're unfamiliar with, they learned to work with what they had. Pieces of glass, stuff that was just left over, might be considered trash among the enslavers. They took that material and imbued it with power. And for me, that was so that was like that was practice changing in the way that I approach magic. So I wanted to get all that stuff, and the story of magic resistance is a story of people who were often powerless. Their power was taken from them, and they had to find their power again, in a new place or with new traditions, new plants, new stones, new herbs, things like that. So I'm really happy to hear that. Like that, that to me is the real crux of the book. I think is
Oh,
those
yeah,
is
yeah.
those histories.
Well, you also mentioned Isabel Gowdie, which is one of my favorite historical figures.
Hmm.
The book, The Confessions of Isabel Gowdie, is the kind of read that you sink into if you know you're going to be convalescing for a year and a half, because it is dry and it is thick, but it's got
Yeah.
so much in it, and like so much of our ancestors, people forget, like with modern Wicca and things like that. It was transgressive. It was always an act of social justice. This was how people found justice. And I think you really captured that with the book, and the way it was put together made that very digestible. I enjoyed it. I absorbed it very quickly.
Right, thank you. No, I really appreciate that. It's the research. There was so much that I didn't know. I was aware of like Operation Cone of Power
Hmm.
and
Right.
all of like the sort of, classic stories that we've all heard. But I barely scratched the surface with this book.
Hmm.
There's just
Mm.
so much out there. And with such great scholarship nowadays into all these traditions and into the history, there's just more and more coming out all the time. So I
Hmm.
feel like it was hard to pick from so much material. And yeah, I love it. It's endlessly fascinating. I feel like this is a real gold mine that has yet to be kind of really dug into by historians.
Hmm.
That is awesome. I enjoyed the I didn't know about the curse Hitler thing. That was hilarious.
Yeah.
You have to get the book to like I can't do it any justice, man. You have to get the book to read it, but evidently that was a thing and it was a big thing and I had no clue and I was like, "Yes." And I could envision it being for people now who other curses that we need to do. And that's one of the things that you're well known for is the spell to bind Donald Trump and all those who abet him. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how that happened?
Yeah, that's a wild story, and I write about it in the book, but it arose out of a feeling that activism had just become so rote. Like the marches, the Women's March, the March for Science, things like that. I took part in those, and I've been an activist since I was a teenager. So it's just kind of what I do. I go and I march and I make my sign, and I chant the chants and all that sort of stuff. But I started realizing that, especially in today's corporate media world, that doesn't get much play anymore. It's almost kind of marginalized now. We know people are going to show up, we know they're going to march. You might get a few minutes on, mainstream TV. As a journalist, I know like protests just a lot of journalists just go, oh, it's another protest. There's
Yeah.
nothing breaks through anymore. Even with social media, with the way the algorithm is structured, you see protests, but they don't really carry the power, I think, that is necessary. So being frustrated with the way protests were not really covered effectively or as thoroughly as they should be, I really started thinking I've always been like a prankster too. I've always been drawn to like just doing things that interrupt reality and interject a bit of surreality. So I loved the Yippies. I loved Witch, the Women's International Terrorist Conspiracy from Hell. I always, I loved, I loved, in particular, what I kept coming back to was when the Yippies decided to levitate the Pentagon to get the spirits of war out of the Pentagon. And that for me was such a brilliant, can I curse on this program?
Yes, you can.
A
Mhm.
brilliant mind fuck to society. And because it was so out of left field and people were like, do they really think they were going to levitate the Pentagon? And just that surreal aspect of it, I always thought was genius. Abby Hoffman, Jerry Rubin, I thought those guys were just, and women were just absolute geniuses. And I really felt like we needed something like that. We needed
Mhm.
something that could just make people go, what? What do you mean? And so I was sitting around with a friend and I was going through like a list of ideas, like we could have some kind of, big concert and donate the money to Planned Parenthood or to immigrant groups or something like that. Well, I just kept trying to think of, I felt like I had to do something.
Right.
This was after the election, and everything felt full of doom. I mean,
Hmm.
it was horrible what we saw happening, and we knew it was going to get worse. So I kept bouncing ideas around, and then being a magical practitioner, I said to my friend, we'd had a couple beers at the time too. I was like, what if what about like a spell? What about if we could get like hundreds of people together to cast a spell on that man? And my friend was like, that's ridiculous. You've had some goofy ideas, but that idea is one of your dumbest. Like that's never going to work. But it stuck with me, and
Mhm.
I couldn't shake it. And so I wrote this ritual, and I put some humor into it with a stubby
Hmm.
orange candle
Right.
and things like that. But I also put sincerity into it because I believe that, you know, when we do things together, when we do rituals together, it has power.
Mhm.
And so I wrote this thing and I shared it with a few people, and they gave me some feedback, some really good feedback. Some of the, people I respected as magical thinkers. And I put it together. I'm like, okay, all right, I'm gonna put it online and see what happens. And I thought maybe, a few people in the magical community might find it and do it and share it. But it went like immediately viral. Like I published it on Medium, and within an hour, I was watching the numbers go up and I was watching the shares go up. And this is kind of, social media was still possible to get traction. It's a little
Yeah.
harder nowadays, I think,
Yeah, it
for
is.
something, an individual project to get traction. But this
Mhm.
just, it blew up. I mean, and before I knew it, and I was working, a day job at a university, and I had to shut my door because like it was constant emails and people were calling me and things like that. And I knew and I had set the date like a couple of weeks later for the first mass ritual was on the waning crescent moon. And every day that went past, it was just more and more astonishing to me how this thing was taking off. And covens were contacting me saying they were going to do it. Every major news organization was like, okay, we want to film this. We want someone we want footage of witches doing this. And this is one of my favorite things that came out of this experience is as the day got closer, like CNN, Fox News, NBC, ABC, BBC, all these people were like, we want to see this. We want to film it. So I started talking to some covens and groups that I knew. And everybody's like, no way, man. Like, we're not putting ourselves out there as red meat for the MAGA crazies to come after us.
Right.
But the TV stations would not give up. So finally, I did something kind of uncharacteristic, and I just lied. I said, well, I hear a bunch of witches are going to be doing this ritual outside of Trump Tower in New York City. And they went, all right, we'll send our crews there. So, I'm like, oh shit, should I have done that? That's kind of mean. But they really like, it was relentless. They were relentless. And I knew I was doing it with a bunch of people, and the group just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And this was in Baltimore, but it was in a nice wooded area. We had a big fire, and that footage I think is still around. So we live streamed it on Facebook. And the night that it happened, I mean, I was so exhausted, like I hadn't slept. I was nervous. I was just full of energy. And this ritual, this thing just a couple weeks before that I'd, just written and uploaded had taken on such immensity and such power. And people were telling me they were doing it. People were calling. I had a friend in the UK who went into a grocery store and heard two elderly women talking about the spell against the man. And it was like, it was everywhere. It was global. And I knew so many people just within my sphere of friends who were doing it. So the night that it happened, we did it. And it was just like, it was so energizing. But at the same time, I was so exhausted that at the end of this ritual, we burned his image and we said, you're fired, you're fired, you're fired as he burned. And everyone was cheering and laughing and cackling. And I just flopped down on this little tree stump. And a friend of mine came up and he held up his phone. And he's like, look, they're doing it at Trump Tower. Like, there are witches at Trump Tower doing this. And that's when, like, that that gif of like the guy's head exploding, like clouds, like that's what happened to me at that point. I was like, I can't believe this is my life, and this is what is happening. So it just blew up, and then it never stopped. And I did it every single month until after the election, and he was gone. And then I was like, because that's a lot, every month to get together, to work yourself up for that. I had people, regular groups that I would do it with. And I was just like, thank God I don't have to do this again. And here we are.
Surprise.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's one of the things that I like about several of these spells that you have in the book is that there's a timing given so that you can join other people who are doing it at that same time. It's one of the things that I really value about how you set this up is that you set it so that timing, and there's an understanding, I think, here that the more minds, the more power, the more we're all looking at the same thing and doing the same thing, the more we will be successful. And so it's one of the things that I really, really appreciated about that. I also appreciated, one of my favorite quotes is, powerful egotists hate people laughing at them. And if you read you're fired, you're fired, you're fired. My son came over and he's very political and he's been doom and gloom lately. And I said, just read the spell. Just don't worry about anything else. Just read the spell. And he got to you're fired, you're fired. He was like, yeah.
That's funny. That's how I feel too every time I do it. And that was a lesson for me. I didn't originally view this as a way of recharging everyone's batteries, but it soon became clear that that's what this does. I mean, I knew ritual has all sorts of, physiological and mental and emotional effects and positive effects on our behaviors and our lives and things like that. But this really drove it home because I would hear from so many people. They're like, I was depressed, I was beaten down, I was ready to give up, and I would do this ritual and I'd feel okay again. I'd feel my power coming back. And
Mhm.
for me, that became the real teaching for me. That's what I learned from this experience is that might be the best aspect of that ritual and in general all rituals we do is this bringing back our power as reclaiming our power in times when it feels like we have none. So that honestly, that was the most humbling thing. Like it was wild to be getting invites to be on Fox and Friends and crap like that, which I led on Tucker Carlson's producer. I kept saying I was gonna show up, and then at the last minute I was like, "Fuck you, man! I would never come on your show." And that gave me such joy. And fortunately, the woman who turned up and did the show was an amazing witch and just absolutely floored him. Amanda Yates Garcia, the Oracle of L.A.
Oh, okay.
Hmm.
She
Yeah.
she went on in my place, and I was terrified. I thought, oh no, this could be really, really terrible. I didn't know who she was. I just knew someone had accepted his offer to be on his show, and she blew him away. I mean, he was tongue tied. He was spellbound, and that was beautiful. And because of that, I got to know her and things, and she gave me a nice blurb for the book and stuff like that. I gave her a lot of praise for her book too, which is great. But yeah, it was that what humbled me out of all this, being a weird, very minor celebrity from this whole thing and writing a book and all that. What humbled me the most was the people telling me like, this helped me get through this terrible time. Doing
Hmm.
this ritual and laughing at him, like you said, that laughter, that that just that burning of the image is power.
Hmm.
That does incredible things to our nervous system, our spirits. It that that I felt like if I did nothing else, the fact that I could help some people
Yeah.
get through a terrible time, that made me feel wonderful. That was what made me feel the best out of this whole experience.
That is awesome to hear. It's kind of surreal also for me right now, hearing you say this and having this conversation because I talked about you before I knew that you were you. When all of this was happening, I had a public group, and what you started spawned off into like 50 other different directions, and everybody started hexing them. I forget the number now, but they keep finding witches bottles like secretly buried at Mar-a-Lago. Like
Uh-huh.
I adore that.
Yeah.
It's like seeing the physical deterioration. I think something's working.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we actually had a conversation. So like this was like an open public class. It was like 101, and it was able that conversation about like mass hexing through the internet and connecting all of this. We use that as a way to explore like ethics and like magical responsibility and all of that. And so many of them came from the direction of just like modern Wicca with like the
Hmm.
threefold law,
Yep. Yep.
and they were like, well, I don't hex, that's for personal gain and everything. And I may have had several semi-famous rants about the whole personal gain and altruism thing that
Uh,
my blood pressure raised a few times. Um, But that actually led me to a question for you,
Hmm. Hmm.
with regards. So when I was reading the hexing Hitler thing, I was reminded, I was kind of taken back to one of my original craft teachers, and she was much more, kind of modern Wicca,
Hmm.
coming out of like this traditions of the 60s and 70s. And we were told, the threefold law. It's like she took it as this very kind of rigid thing. Um, and she would always have this phrase, to bind ye must be bound. And so, like, when you do a binding, the idea that your energy is now constraining their energy. And
Hmm.
so once you bind one person, you're basically, you're done, because your energy is always going to be binding them until released.
Hmm.
And I don't know that I ever believed that. That didn't make a lot of
Hmm.
like sense to me. But
Hmm.
how do you, like, as far as it goes with like baning and hexing and all that, how do
Hmm.
you engage, morally with like, somebody who would argue that threefold law?
Yeah, well, as you might imagine, I caught a lot of flack
Mm-hmm.
from people who embrace the threefold law. And first of all, I told them, I said, well, first of all, I'm not a Wiccan.
Mm-hmm.
So the threefold law, that's great if it's your thing, but it's not my thing. I also think a lot of people think or believe, and that's fine, that the threefold law is like some sort of ancient thing passed down from the Paleolithic or something, rather than I think it's pretty clear that like Gerald Gardner kind
Mm-hmm.
of made that, along with the system, the incredible and beautiful system that he built.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, not being a Wiccan, but also not believing that there's any like ancient or very really deep traditional provenance to that. I just said that's, if it's your thing, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Do it. If that's what you believe, do that. What I see this magic as is less, and I crafted it very, very, very carefully. Because first of all, um, you know, I'm not one who wishes harm,
Mm-hmm.
that often. I might make an exception for Nazis, uh, but I looked
As you
at,
should, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I look at this more as defensive magic, and that in particular because it was aimed at the most powerful human being on the planet. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to do anything that would have, that would that I that would be, calling for like death or illness or things like that. Because first of all, I generally don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do believe in is defensive magic. And some examples I use are, I'm a parent. If there was some, sick pedophile person stalking one of my children and I saw that person on a playground, what would I do? Well, first of all, I try to get them away from my child. I call the authorities. Um, if that person tried to come into my house, I would physically stop them. And although I'm very much a proponent of nonviolence in the
Mm-hmm.
along, I read Gandhi, Thoreau, Martin Luther King Jr. I think that's real strength. Like strength, nonviolence is strength. It's the ultimate show of
Mm-hmm.
strength. But even Gandhi would say that if you're defending yourself, if you're just stopping someone from harming you, that is still kind of allowed under the principle of nonviolence. Now, granted,
Mhm.
some people might say differently. To
Mhm.
me, self defense is the exception. And what I saw is really intense harm being done to people and things I care about, to the planet that I care about. And in order to kind of make this work for as many people as possible, I looked at binding spells. I don't believe, like I would disagree with your instructor that somehow, you can only like you've only got so many binding points and you could put that into one thing or something like that. To
Binding spoons.
binding,
Roll the
I'm
d20.
out of binding spoons. Yeah, exactly. Uh, but But so I crafted that particular ritual so that it would be along the lines of if someone is not doing any harm, the spell will have no effect on them. If they're having harm, if they're causing harm, then it will stop them from doing more harm. So the key, and what I really tried to push very clear, as clearly as I could, is that this is a spell to prevent harm. This
Right.
is not a spell to inflict harm. And a lot of people still, know that's going to come back and bounce back at you. And magic is sticky. If you do it, it's going to stick to you, and your life will go to hell and all that. Um, it didn't. And my firm belief is that if I am doing magic to defend against harm, there's no ethical quandary with that.
Hmm.
In the same way that if I saw a bulldozer ready to, raise a park that I cared about, I might put my body in front of it.
Right.
Um, if I see harm coming to someone or some being, I might try to put myself in the middle of that to stop it. That's what I felt like this magic was. Now, I did in the book, there is a hex against the NRA, which I believe, as a corporation, I feel perfectly comfortable hoping that corporation dies and goes away. Not
Agreed.
not harming any human being at all, no individuals, but the organization itself has just fueled so much death and horror, and fueled so many people's thinking, it twisted so many people's thinking, that I'm all for a hex in that case.
Right.
Also, some reprehensible individuals who would put people that I love and care about into, camps or have them murdered. In that case, the gloves are off. Then a hex is
Right.
fine. To stop murder, to stop, you know, stop destroying people's lives, ripping children from their mothers, things like that. That kind of stuff's pretty reprehensible to me. So,
Hmm.
Yeah.
I would say I also try to, um, you know, to focus as much as possible on stopping harm. I think if we, as magical practitioners, if we agree that, we don't like to inflict harm, we would just prefer to stop harm, stop harming
Mhm.
other people, stop harming the planet, stop harming other sentient beings. I'm so nonviolent, I don't eat animals. I haven't eaten animals for 35 years. So I take this stuff very seriously. I take nonviolence very seriously. Um, but I also take very seriously self-defense
Hmm.
and the stopping of harm. I think it has to be done with not overwhelming force. That's the principle of self-defense. If you go into a courtroom, where I was actually a juror on a murder case not that long ago, and the lawyers went over the how self-defense how a self-defense defense works for someone. If say I did this in self-defense, you have to show that what you've done is proportional and not overly, not too much force. You use just the appropriate force to stop the bad thing from happening, to defend yourself. But if someone comes at you with a plastic fork and you shoot them with a gun, well, that's not self-defense. So it's all about proportionality. So that's how I look at that. That's kind of long-winded, way of addressing it. But I really believe in that we need to defend ourselves, particularly marginalized communities need to defend themselves. We need to defend our marginalized siblings,
Agreed.
especially those who are, who are being, just horribly mistreated, and the rhetoric, like the trans community, for example. I mean,
Yeah.
Yes.
the fact that the right wing extremists are trying to paint trans people as dangerous is just the most appalling thing that I can possibly imagine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so the danger of violence is very real on the other
Mm-hmm.
side. And again, I'm not a proponent of violence. I don't advocate violence. I think violence is terrible. I think political violence is terrible because, as we've seen, it further radicalizes uh, the people involved, whether it's the
Yeah.
victims or it's the perpetrators.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I absolutely advocate nonviolence, but I also strongly advocate self-defense and taking care of people that we love.
Absolutely. I just drove cross country with my husband, who is a gay man of color. Um, in some of the scariest places, you don't want to be a gay man of color.
Hmm.
And agreed. And as far as the trans community, they're the most nonviolent demographic I think we have in this country. So what,
Yeah,
for the right to paint them in that light, pardon my language, that's a ballsy coup of the narrative. Like
yeah,
that is a spin.
yeah, yeah. It's just what it's what fascists do, though. You know, fascists need enemies,
Hmm.
and they always tend to go after the easiest targets, and which is, have it's like, come on, haven't we seen this playbook enough? I, I'm just shocked at how, people I grew up with, people I went to
Hmm.
high school, have embraced this ugliness, this mean, violent, angry, just purely ugly. It's shocking to me. And it's also shocking that the playbook remains the same. It's the same stupid playbook the Nazis
Hmm.
used. It's the same stupid playbook used against the Jews and pogroms, the same playbook that's always used. And,
Hmm.
can't we, sure, history repeats itself, but can we just kind of stop? Maybe, maybe put aside this playbook and work towards maybe something a little more productive.
Yeah, we were talking about this morning, and one of the things Kyler says is love can build bridges, but hate can move mountains. And I'm always reminded of watching a YouTube video a long time ago. This guy said, if you want to make a group cohesive, create an enemy.
Yeah.
And I was
Hmm.
appalled, but it's true. I mean,
Yeah.
that is what it
Yeah.
is. And I think the terrifying part is we're beginning to see that pagans and people who are practitioners are beginning to be labeled that enemy as well. And
Yeah.
Hmm.
that becomes, I think, even more important to look at the self-defense aspect of this and to understand that we're talking about self-defense. We're talking about
Yeah.
preserving ourselves, not necessarily taking out someone else. We just want to be
Hmm.
able to have an existence that is free from harassment. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things that you have to look at. But we would be remiss if we didn't talk about Jezebel, and the Jezebel article. If you
Hmm.
aren't familiar, Jezebel is a
Hmm.
feminist online presence, and they did a satirical article that said we paid some itsy witches to curse Charlie Kirk. The timing was unfortunate for them because
Hmm.
then Kirk was unfortunately offed
Hmm.
right after this came out.
Hmm.
And the thing that upsets me about this isn't that it was satirical, and clearly the girl who wrote it felt like she was just playing around and
Hmm.
making a good article. I don't
Hmm.
think she had any consequences in mind whatsoever. But I feel like the part that's damaging is that when we go on the offense and bring harm about, that's
Hmm.
when we make ourselves a better target, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
it demonizes the user, not the person that you've targeted. And I think that's the thing that upsets me the most, is that it's a way to for Fox News and those people
Hmm.
to demonize a practice that I hold very sacred,
Yeah.
And I don't think that was the intention of anyone involved. I really don't. If you've read some of the other articles that have come out, the people who've done it said that wasn't what we were going for, right? Like that's
Yeah.
not, we were aiming for not harm. And if you read some of the spells that they put out, it's clear that wasn't the case. They weren't trying
Yeah.
to hurt Kirk in any way. They were just trying to make the rhetoric stop. And that's a different thing when you're attacking the concept, not necessarily the person.
Yeah, that was really unfortunate and unfortunate timing. And I took, a lot of the witches and pagan friends of mine were terrified. They're like, you know, and I just said, look, just like let this blow over.
Mhm.
It was clearly, like you said, it was satirical. It was very bad timing. And a- again, it's why I've always been very clear that like we need to we need to be clear that we are a spiritual force, and we are a force that embraces nonviolence and building bridges. And it's why I the I wrote my book so that it wasn't just focused on witches. It wasn't just focused on pagans. It was anyone can do rituals. And I hope they do, because
Mhm.
rituals have documented positive outcomes when we do. That's why we've done them. We're ritual beings. We've done rituals ever since the first proto-human made a little circle in the mud with a stick and said some words to the stars and things like that. So I think um, that was terrible timing, but I think most of us agree that that was an abhorrent act, and that's not what we want to happen. Again, because political violence leads to more political violence, and it just spirals out of control. And we've seen where that can take us. Um, but I think we need to be clear that we bring our spiritual selves to this resistance against the darkness that the darkness that includes bigotry, hatred. We're not that. And to me, the beautiful thing that the witch became the face of resistance in this past, you know, 10 years or so is I think a really powerful statement, because
Mhm.
witches, we stand for we're the ones that got kicked out of the village, but we stand for all the others who've been kicked out of the village. We stand for the marginalized. And I don't know if that was always the case. Early Wicca, it was middle class folks, and,
Mhm.
it was kind of, nice little country estates getting naked and doing our rituals, and then everybody, goes home to their nice house. But witchcraft has become very, very different. It's become embraced by people who have been pushed to the margins. It has been embraced by people who've been oppressed. And
Mhm.
I love that. I think
Yeah.
what a better, what a better face for the resistance than the witch. Going back to the group witch in the 1960s, and I'm all for like wearing the pointy black hats and the veils and dressing all in black and that sort of thing. Like embrace this archetype that has become so powerful and so scary.
Mhm.
And going back to the Jezebel article, like it was unfortunate, but like you said, it was satirical in the same way that a lot, like the binding ritual that I developed, had elements of satire in it. Like, we have to bring humor. We have to laugh at those deluded fundamentalists who think we're, eating babies and drinking adrenochrome and all that garbage. Like, we have to laugh at these people because it's laughable. And it's scary and it's dangerous too, because some of those people are in places of power. But we need to laugh. We need to go, look, this is ridiculous, like, you're afraid of what? Why are you so afraid? What's wrong with you? And laughter is a big part of that. And we have to also, it's like, it's important to keep our own sense of humor during this time. We can't become humorless. Like that's their side. They're the humorless
Right.
people. They're the ones who see no nuance. It's all black and white. It's
Right.
all very, very confined. And we're not like that. Like we are the people who embrace all sorts of gender, sexual preference, neurodiversity. If you want to wear a fursuit and go to a convention, or if you're just if you like to go to church, but you're a nice person, that's who we are.
Hmm.
That's what we need to show ourselves as, is we are the majority in this country. And I think we need to keep that in mind too. And it's hard because the nasty, mean, bloviating fascists, they get all the attention, and they're still a minority. I really believe that. Like, I believe there were lots of factors that resulted in the election and where we are now, but I think most people are getting kind of appalled by what they're
Hmm.
seeing,
Right.
and I feel like the tide is turning, and we really represent more people. We represent a
Hmm.
larger percentage of this country and this world. It's just those people, they get the attention because they want the attention. And the things they say are so abhorrent that they get our attention. It's a lot easier to say, you know, let's kill homeless people than it is to go out and say, hey, we think maybe if we have better housing policies. So our wonkiness is to our detriment sometimes. But I think that's why in my most down, depressed, watching things fall apart, watching everything that I love being dismantled, watching institutions being sold for parts, watching, today it was the appalling worship of militarism and machismo and patriarchy that was on stage in front of all these generals who are not like
Hmm.
that. That's the
Right.
thing.
No.
Watching this hideous clown show of values that are so old and stupid and just part of our past that we should leave behind. Um, Even in those moments, I realized, wait a minute, the rest of the world is not like that. The rest of the world
Right.
is getting increasingly queer and gender fluid and brown and open to other people and their ways of living. And, I look at young people. There's certainly a lot of crazy young fascists, but I also see a lot of young people who are beautiful, who are out
Hmm.
there saying, we welcome everyone. Like, it's okay. Be who you are. And I really feel like that is the direction we're going in. Unfortunately, there's a lot of damage that is being
Right.
done, and it's going to take
Hmm.
it's going to take Reconstruction 2.0 to even get us back on the path that we were. But
Yeah.
what I keep telling people who are dejected and depressed, I'm like, look, let's get through this. Let's get to that. Imagine how good that is going to feel when these
Right.
cretins, when these bigots, when these awful, mean, cruel people are gone, and we can start being ourselves and rebuilding again. That's what I say. Like, let's get to that point. Focus on that point. Let's get there. And just imagine now, as part of rituals and magic, we like to experience where that ritual will take us, where we're
Hmm.
going to
Right.
be, feel the outcome while you're doing
Right.
the ritual. That's what I tell people when they're completely dejected. I'm like, we're going to get through this. focus on how that's going to feel, to
Yeah.
rebuild after this, after these atrocities, after this mess. It's going to be hard. It's going to be really, really hard. Um, but I really believe we're going to get through this. I am an
Hmm.
optimist. I think there are more of us than there are of them. I think the more they take the mask off and show
Yeah.
the ugliness beneath, that more people are going to wake up to that.
And, as you're speaking, I'm imagining this beautiful world, hopefully in the nearer than farther future, where we live in a place so free of judgment that all of those young fascists are finally free to actually have their face show on their grinder profile, you know?
Yes, exactly. Exactly, yes. Where they stop hating themselves,
Yes.
where they can, I mean, and that's the root of it all, is just
Yeah.
broken people,
Hmm.
who can't accept what they are, who they are, and turning that hatred against others.
Yeah.
Exactly, you nailed it. You nailed it.
Well, humor is it's such an important part of the healing process. Like the first ordination I got was with CAW, and they formed around like Heinlein Stranger in a Strange Land.
Uh-huh.
And the quote from that book that I will carry written in my heart for always, man is the animal who laughs. Like if you laugh into the face of the fear and the intimidation they're trying to throw at you, it takes
Mm-hmm.
its power away. Through
Yes.
laughter, you can conquer that fear, and that fear is their number one power. And
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the powers of the witch, is to transmute someone else's strength into a weakness if it's being used against you. And I
Exactly.
I love that.
I love that. No, that's beautiful. And we also need to, I talk about this in the preface of the book. We can't let them take our joy from us. So
Hmm.
when we resist, and there is a power, there's an energy that is arises in us when we put ourselves on the line, when we're marching. Yeah, I downplayed marching a little bit, but that's only because it of the way it's been kind of co-opted, and doesn't really have the
Hmm.
effect. But there's beauty in it. Like, I will never stop doing that. I will never stop. Um, I will never stop seeking that. It's a joyous feeling when you're with people and you're aligned and you're focused and you are
Hmm.
resisting something you know is so wrong and so terrible that you're willing to put your body out in front of it. It's and those that joy, we have to keep that alive. And that's why I think the Pentagon levitation, the witch, I think creative expressions. There was a guy who was following around guardsmen playing the Imperial March from Star Wars and
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
that is the style of activism. Like, that's what works, not just stern shaking your fist. Make it joyous.
Yeah.
Bring humor to it. Bring art to it and creativity. Like,
Yeah.
that's how we keep ourselves energized. That's how, and it confounds them too. They don't know
Hmm.
what to do with that.
Yes.
They 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 know exactly, they think, oh, Antifa, they're going to be throwing bottles and Molotov cocktails at us. But when they see, a bunch of people dressed up like stereotypical witches, just kind of
Hmm.
marching at them with fingers out, that freaks them out. They don't know
Hmm.
how to deal with that. So we need to keep breaking those stereotypes and injecting humor and passion and creativity into what we do. And I think that's what the
Hmm.
binding ritual showed, is like there's a thirst for that. And not only is there a thirst for that, but people pay attention. People are like, "Oh, I can do that. I can be
Hmm.
part of this. I can do something that's kind of weird." The other joyful thing I got out of this whole experience, doing rituals publicly with people and things like that, is so many people, especially that first time around in 2017. So many people said to me, I've never done a ritual before. Like, I don't know what this stuff is. I don't know what magic is. But but I'm going to do this. I'm going to try it. Like so many people were just like, oh, what the hell? Might as well. Nothing else is
Right.
working. Let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
But then they do it and they go, oh, yeah, wow, that felt pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And so I think the more we bring people into this idea of collective rituals, of making magic, however you want to think of magic, doing it together, I think the more power we wield. So I
Mm-hmm.
hope that was my hope with this book, is that it gets people thinking, whether you're, a Christian and you look at this as prayer, whether you're a pagan, whether you're a witch, whether you're a druid, if you're a chaos magician, if you're just somebody who thinks rituals are great psychological tools that make you feel better, just let's do more of it. Let's do more of it together. Let's let's figure out another version of levitating the Pentagon. I had an idea, never came to fruition. I don't know if it would have worked, but of people dressing in priest garb and doing an exorcism, on the White House. Things like just stuff like that. Like I want to inspire people to just do something that breaks ordinary reality, because that carries such real power.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I agree. One of the things that I liked about this book is that you talk about resiliency. And in our podcast, we have a section at the end of all of our podcasts called Resiliency Corner, where we try to give tips and tricks to be more resilient.
Mm-hmm.
And Kyler was talking about how he felt called out by you and his telephone. He said that it was not fair that his phone was accusing him of the time that he was spending on it.
Yes, I checked the little screen thing and it told me how many hours I'd spent on it. Because like I'm a traditional media artist. A while back I switched to digital, so I'm on my iPad drawing or I'm
Mm-hmm.
reading books. And I looked at it and the words, just the way it said it, seemed very accusatory. And I'm like, I'm sensitive right now. I don't need this. But like I did love that in the book too. It's like that, how do you take care of yourself? Because
Yeah.
like you have to unplug. And I think like one of the things that's fueled the division in this country has been our slavish devotion to the digital.
Yep.
And if we don't unplug, if we don't take care of our own mental health, like thanks to this, I've been kind of floundering on what to do. I have a very small kind of fledgling group that's just beginning to start. And the first actual bit of constructive magic that I'm going to teach them is how to build personal and house wards so that they can feel
Mm-hmm.
safe and have that
Mm-hmm.
sacred space in their home. And as I was reading this book, I'm like, that's it. I've been playing around with it and I couldn't decide. I couldn't land my finger on exactly what I wanted to do. And that's what it is.
That's
Yep.
great. No, and resiliency is so crucial. And I remember how important that was to me to get that material into the book, because just of the way, so many people were feeling broken. And you're
Hmm.
right about, I mean, the algorithms were custom designed to turn us all against each other,
Hmm.
because hatred fuels engagement. A nice picture of a cat we'll click on, but if some guy says something that we find absolutely intolerable, how could you possibly think that? We jump on it. An example,
Hmm.
we know this and we experience it, but sometimes it takes an actual example to bring it home. And for me, I'm not a vegan. Like I'm vegetarian, and because I live in Maryland, I eat crabs once in a while. So I've got my own like hypocrisy about my Buddhist don't harm sentient life kind of beliefs, whatever. And I honor everybody's journey wherever they are, on whatever they do ethically. Um, but for me, it's always so. But I'm on a lot of like, I like to cook with plant. Like I like to make like vegan meals and things like that. It's just fun. So I get a lot of stuff on Facebook, like vegan recipe, blah blah blah. And what I noticed is inevitably there will be like a message, like a picture of a pig, like, oh, isn't he cute? You know, you shouldn't eat this little guy, blah, 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 you know, typical, that kind of thing. And the one comment that Facebook will surface to put below that picture of that pig is, bacon, you know, or something like that.
Right.
And,
Yep.
and I started noticing that, and I'm like, it was the first time like I understood, like I really understood. You know, I've read about the Rohingya and the massacres that Facebook kind of contributed
Hmm.
to and things like that, and how they ignored that. I knew all about how the algorithm pushes us against each other because that's what gets them clicks. But it was such a real example for me. And every time I would see one of those vegan things came up, that was the one comment. The person like, "Oh boy,
Mhm.
I'm hungry. I can't wait to get that in
Hmm.
my," and you know, it really drove it home. And so I've been, and it's hard because a person who writes books and does talks and courses and things like that, like we've been trained to need, we need these services that we've kind of sold our
Hmm.
souls to, because that's how, if you don't do that, then no one knows what you're doing, you know, as someone who creates or writes or whatever. So we're in this unholy relationship with these
Mhm.
software companies. Um, but I've really learned, like, I've one thing I've done is I've tuned myself down. I don't engage, in arguments or anything like that anymore.
Yeah.
I don't take the bait. I think that's an important first step.
Yeah.
Not taking the bait, use it as a way, pruning the tree keeps it healthy. So someone is obnoxious, then they're gone. Um,
Right.
but these tools are still I mean, we still have to carefully engage with them if we engage with them.
Yes.
And I've been slowly backing away. And the one thing, there's one concrete thing I've done, and I recommend this to people who are like me, who, you get up in the morning and your phone's charging on the bedstand right next to you. So you grab it, and pretty soon, it's like 40 minutes later and you're just scrolling, looking at stuff, whatever. What I do now on the weekends is I don't touch that phone. I get up and I do what I used to do before all this technology invaded our lives. I get a book and I sit and I get my cup of coffee and I sit and read for at least, try to do at least an hour. And I just read, And I started like after I did this for a few weeks, I was like, I feel different. Like
Mhm.
I feel like myself again. And of course like, because we're so used to it, you'd be like, oh, I should check my phone, maybe. But if you just absolutely stop, just even that little bit of time had an enormous effect on my mental health, and so I think little by little we're sort of learning. There's one of my favorite writers, Eric Davis. Um, he writes about psychedelics and culture and technology and things like that. And he came to Baltimore and did a talk, and it really stuck with me. And he was talking about this was kind of in the early days of cell phones, smartphones. And he said, you know what you have to do? You have to treat that thing like it's a shoe stone, like it's an obsidian scrying mirror. He's like, you have to make a pact with it. You have to say, okay, I'll give you this, but you're not taking that from me. And the idea of a pact with these devices, and it always, they are magical devices. I mean, we could give
Yeah.
this to John D, and his everything would have been very different. They take us places, they show us things that are happening. It's what every magician ever wanted. It's a little black piece of shiny glass. And so I think we need to look at these things as kind of entities and make a very clear pact with it. Like, I'm not going to allow you to harm me. I'm going to
Right.
use
Hmm.
you in a way that I would use a magical tool that's on the shelf
Yep.
behind me.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mhm.
I agree with
I
that.
like that.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I long ago decided that if my phone rings, I don't have to answer.
Yep.
It's a
Yep.
choice. You
Yeah.
can choose not to engage. And I feel that way about social media, which is oddly enough what we were laughing about this morning, because I was like, how did I miss this whole bind Trump thing? Like I'm so off social media. I totally missed all of that. And now I'm kind of bummed about it, but I can still do it because you have it timed right. So if you want to get the book, this is the what it looks like. It's Magic for the Resistance. Michael M. Hughes, we're so glad that you came to us today, and we appreciate your time and your wisdom. And I'm not going to give a resiliency corner because you've already done such a great job. So I'm going to
You wrote a whole
not
book.
do that. It was great. Yeah, you wrote the whole book on it. What do you have to say, Kyler, as we sign off?
Great conversation. Anytime you want to come back and visit, please just let us know. You have dropped so many wonderful references that the nerd in me wants to just dig into. As has been previously discussed on this podcast, Kyler sometimes fangirls. It's not as strong a reaction as when I met Reba McEntire, but it was present. So I repressed, but please come back. Please visit.
I would love to. It has been a great conversation, and what you're doing, just from the conversation we've had. I mean, now is the time for people like us to be very present, very clear, very embracing of our community and the larger community, and those bridges that were mentioned earlier. Now is the time to build those bridges. I want this book to be read by people of all faiths, of no faith, curious, anything. I just now is the time, I think, for people like us collectively to really step up because we're needed. So I appreciate you having me on, and I am grateful for the work that you're both doing as well.
Well, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
We appreciate you, and thank you again. Please come back anytime. And as I always
love
sign
to.
off saying, y'all have a magical day, and we'll see you next time.
Blessings.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Urban on Witches. Please reach co-host Kyler Petrie and Rev Dia at urbanonwitches@gmail.com. That's urbanonwitches@gmail.com to suggest topics for shows or comment on past episodes. Please join our Discord channel, Urban on Witches Podcast. Follow us on TikTok at Urban on Witches. Follow us on YouTube at Urban on Witches to watch all episodes. And listen to all our past podcasts on your favorite podcasting platform. Rev Dia is a witch for hire as an officiant, life coach, astrologer, geomancer, and medium, and can be reached at www.revdia.net. See you next time. Thank you for joining us on the Circle Podcast, presented by Circle Sanctuary, and produced for all who follow nature-centered paths. Join us throughout the week for various programming connecting with the community around the world. Please don't forget to watch for updates on the Circle Sanctuary website at www.circlesanctuary.org. Follow us on Facebook at Facebook.com/Circle Podcasts. We can also be found on your favorite podcast hosting sites, such as iTunes, Spotify, and others. Until next time, many blessings.